What do you make of all this?
I feel that we need to do a lot of thinking about the structures involved, the incentives, and just the way that the data infrastructure, in a way, that the process of funding research that's going to be big enough to make any sense, the support for sharing data, and you're right, it's not just social psychology. I mean, psychology has taken the brunt of this, but talking to epidemiologists, they're worried that basically all the medical trials are too small. And they're too small because they have various very high standards, and we like high standards, but the very high standards make the trials incredibly expensive to run. And if the trials are very expensive to run, you run the smallest possible trial that you could. And there are ways to patch that up. You go, well, we'll do a meta-analysis, we'll put together a bunch of trials, but that's not as useful as just doing the first trial really well. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this recently, but I feel that there are some amazing things we could be doing with the right kind of data infrastructure, the right sharing of tools, the right transparency, that could just lead scientific progress ahead in leaps and bounds. And at the moment, we're still fumbling towards that much more slowly than I would like.
I think you're spot on there, and I think one other thing we should add to the table is the questions we really care about, it's hard to track people long enough to know what the lasting effects are. I read a synthesis of research recently. We don't even know if dental floss is useful. Like 4 out of 5 dentists tell you to floss your teeth. The empirical evidence is not conclusive.
Yeah.
I still floss my teeth, but I don't know that that's good for me.
Yeah.
And no one does.
Yeah. And we do have, there's amazing, so the National Health Service in the UK has got data on basically every interaction you've had with the healthcare system. Every time you went to the doctor, what you were prescribed, it's all there in these big data warehouses. Did you maybe contract a sexually transmitted infection after you got married? Interesting. Did you used to wet the bed when you were 15 years old? It's all there. And the question is how to draw, there's an unbelievable amount of insight can be drawn, scientific insight can be drawn out of that data. How do you do it while protecting people's privacy? And I think we know the answer. People are nerdy enough, go and read Ben Goldacre's review for the UK government. There are solutions to this. But they involve an investment in, I've used this phrase infrastructure before, just the way you structure the data, the way you protect the data, the rules you have, the norms you have for querying that data, which enables the science to be done openly. So every time you make a query of that data, every other scientist with permission sees what query you made. So they can, actually, there's a bug in your code. You made a mistake. So we can fix that. At the same time, you don't ever actually get the data. You get the answer to your query. So you're protecting people's privacy while at the same time having much better structures for open science. So that's the sort of thing that we could be doing, and we aren't. And yeah, it's not just about kind of cute social psychology research that is possibly not true at all. But anyway, there we go. Thank you for answering that question. I realize I got a slightly off track. I had another slightly off track question.
I don't have a track, let's be clear. We can talk about whatever you find interesting.
So I just wanted to get your reflections on Sheryl Sandberg, because she's just stepped down from Meta's board. There's this amazingly powerful businesswoman, all this influence on Facebook. She was kind of worshipped, and then Facebook fell out of fashion, and so she fell out of fashion. And I found her absolutely fascinating from a distance, but you actually wrote a book with her. So I wanted to ask you, what was that like? What did you learn working with Sheryl?
Well, actually, last time I was in the UK for Intelligence Squared, Sheryl and I did an Option B event that Malala was kind enough to host. And I think, I do want to say there are huge problems in social media to fix. It has been sobering as we watch what's happened to Twitter as Elon Musk runs it, to see how much worse Facebook could be, I will say. And yes, there are many ways it could be better, and I've given a lot of input over the years. And still, I think jury is out on how we solve a lot of the problems that social media creates. I think the biggest thing that I learned from working with Sheryl is she has the highest standards of anybody I've ever met. So I was used to writing a draft and then doing a couple of revisions and seeking, getting the 0 to 10 score and then revising some more based on the advice I got, and then I'm done. For Sheryl, a chapter would not see the light of day until there were at least 100 revisions. Like that was a minimum in most cases. And she was so determined to get the data right, and also to be as clear as possible in her communication. And it fundamentally transformed me as a writer. And I don't know if you can see it, Tim, but when I go back and read, there's like a before working with Sheryl and there's an after working with Sheryl. Give and Take remains my favorite idea I've ever worked on. It was my first book. Oh, thank you for those of you who are familiar with it. It was the thing I'd spent.
2 people loved it.
No one else has read it. No, I mean, I'd chosen it as the one thing I wanted to study, and I poured a decade of my research life into it, and so it was like my baby. I would write that book so differently now, and the post-Sheryl books, Think Again and Hidden Potential, I'm much prouder of the writing. And I think they're far better books because of the way that she raised those standards for me, and I think we should all be lucky to collaborate with someone who believes enough in our potential that they're willing to say it's not done yet, even when we're ready to turn it in.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your writing. You have this story in the book about Harvard saying, well, yeah, you can come to Harvard, but you really need help with your writing because it's bad. And you make it look very easy as a writer. You're very accessible. It's very easy to follow. It's definitely you. There are certain turns of phrase that only you would use, that another writer wouldn't, and that's good. There's that. It's not kind of all just smoothed off. So you're a great writer, and you were once a terrible writer, apparently. So talk us through that process.
Well, thank you, I think.
The remedial classes worked, right? But you never went to the remedial classes.
No, I skipped it because I couldn't stomach the idea of taking a class that I was told was for people who spoke English as a 7th language and heavily recruited athletes. And by the way, I got to Harvard already worrying that I was the one mistake who admissions took and I didn't belong there and I wasn't smart enough. And then they fail me on the writing test, which is the first test I take in college. My roommate...
Welcome to Harvard.
Yeah, no, but it gets worse because my roommate was the heavily recruited star quarterback on the American football team. And he passed the writing test. Like, I should drop out. I do not belong here. But one of the pieces of feedback that I got, actually this was more advice from the writing office, was they said, you really need to work on structure because we could not follow your argument. And this is something that still is a challenge for me, which is I suffer more and more now from what psychologists call the curse of knowledge, which is when you know something, you can't imagine what it's like to not know it. And that means it's really hard to explain it to other people who don't understand it. It's why so many, the worst physics teacher you could have for intro physics would be Einstein, because he cannot relate to what it's like to not understand relativity. Actually, he was a terrible teacher and had to cancel his classes because he couldn't draw enough students, despite his brilliance, or maybe because of his brilliance and his expertise. Anyway, so one of the things I had to learn to do was to actually explain my ideas out loud before I wrote them to somebody who knew nothing about the subject. And it's probably my most useful exercise today still.
Yeah. So what advice would you give me? I'm 10 books in. I'm working on 11th. It's hard. How can I become a better writer?
How can Tim Harford become a better writer? That's like David Beckham asking how he can become a better footballer.
I dispute the premise, but still,
Geez, I'd have to think more about that to do it justice, but if you want an off-the-cuff reaction.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I would love to see you do is stay with your amazing stories longer. Your story about Keith Jarrett, to this day, when I sit down to write a story or to prep a TED Talk, the Tim Harford standard is what I'm trying to hit. And sometimes it's over too soon for me. Mm-hmm. It's so rich and so interesting. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel a little bit of you and I have the same instincts, which is we love the data and the science more. And the story is just a vehicle. But as a reader, I'm less like myself. and more like the audience, I think.
Yeah.
And I want you to go into the full narrative more than you do, and you do that beautifully on cautionary tales, and I think you could do more of it on the page.
Okay, noted. Thank you. I do.
Now you have to do it.
We
have a whole room full of people that are expecting it. You're accountable, Tim.
Yeah, and actually the process of writing the Cautionary Tales podcast, which is very story-driven, has, I think, changed the way I think about story. I think another idea from the book that I want to do more is to get more advice earlier for more people. There are a couple of people who see everything and work over everything, but I could show the writing to more people at an earlier stage. And
try it at your own risk.
Yeah, and I don't do that because I'm scared, right? I feel uncomfortable. And
how many successful books will you have written to let go of that fear?
Yeah, well, but I feel like I don't want to show it to you before it's ready, right? But actually, it's the process of. Of course, I do, in fact, want to show it to you before it's ready, because that's why I'm showing it to you.
And that's how you get it ready.
Yeah,
I think.
And this links into you've got this lovely story about these linguists who are just unbelievably good at learning French and Italian and all kinds of obscure languages, many of whom were told.
Did you just call French and Italian obscure languages? Did anybody else hear that? I would excuse an American for doing that. You have no excuse, my friend.
It's not how it sounded in my head, but okay, I'm sure that's what I said.
And in addition, obscure languages. Yes, I'm with you.
And many of them were just told at school they were terrible at languages, or I think one of them, their father spoke Spanish at home, was a native speaker of Spanish, and they couldn't learn Spanish despite that advantage. And it turns out the secret's all about discomfort.
Yeah, I actually didn't know where this chapter was going to go, so I happened to stumble across a polyglot. This is somebody who speaks at least 6 languages fluently and can converse proficiently in another 5. And I just think that's endlessly interesting. How did you learn to do that? Like, did you have a language gene? Were you exposed to a ton of different languages early on during a critical period? And no, it turns out that this guy, Benny Lewis, could not learn a foreign language in school and only started learning them successfully as an adult. How did that happen? And then I'm like, well, is Benny alone? And no, I find Sarah Maria Hasbun, who had the same problem and couldn't learn Spanish despite the fact that her father's Salvadorian. And she grew up in her childhood con un padre hispanohablante y todavía no puede hablar en español. So, like, how did they learn to do that? Like, and what do they know as adult learners that we can all learn? And it turns out their core insight is really simple, which is most of us, when we're taught languages in school, we read them and we write them. And we don't speak them yet because we don't feel comfortable. And we think we've got to master it so we don't embarrass ourselves and sound like idiots. But actually, the way to master it is to speak it. And Sarah Maria told me, she said, learning to speak a language without talking day in, day out is kind of like trying to master the piano by reading like a Schumann biography, or trying to become a great basketball player by watching videos of Steph Curry and LeBron James. Not going to happen. And in order to get over this hurdle that they faced, they had to not only embrace but amplify discomfort. So Benny, he's Irish, and he sets a goal. He moves to a country, and he says, I want to be proficient in 3 months. And his goal is to make 200 mistakes a day when he talks to you. And so he literally will memorize a script in a language he doesn't understand and walk up to strangers and introduce himself and say, hi, I'm Benny. I'm trying to learn a language, and I don't speak this language. And then see how they respond. And every time he makes a mistake in a script, somebody gives him a tip. Mm-hmm. And every moment that he makes a mistake, he remembers the lesson better because he had that little pang of, oh, this is awkward. Why am I doing this? And I think the better you get at embracing that kind of discomfort, the faster you learn.
Yeah, so seek discomfort. I'm going to come back. I think there's an interesting tension or contradiction in the book. But before I ask you
about good, we're going to fight about something.
No, I don't.
I've been waiting for this.
Fight about
Wait a minute, Tim, hold on a second. You won the National Debate Championship once upon a time?
Yeah, it was 1992.
Okay.
You were like 6 years old at the time.
I was 11.
Okay.
But I really thought that part of what I was signing up for tonight was a chance to test my debate skills against a master. And you're not challenging me enough. I mean, you're agreeing with things I say. What kind of debate champion does that?
Okay, so hold that thought. I'm going to come to you guys. Adam clearly wants your most hostile questions.
No. I want to learn from you debating, really. And I want to have my arguments pressure tested. So what's something you disagreed with in the book?
So it's a, rather than a disagreement, a contradiction. So something that puzzled me. You have this really interesting, I think, compelling argument that in order to learn, you need to seek discomfort. Like these polyglots who just humiliate themselves, who are just hungry to make the maximum number of mistakes, and you build on that and explore that. A couple of chapters later in the book, you're talking about the importance of play. And play is not gamification, it's not giving yourself little scores. Play is like really having fun, just kind of messing around and just enjoying yourself. So you're telling us that in order to learn and grow, seek discomfort. And you're also telling us in order to learn and grow, like have fun, like have a great time. So does that not strike you as somewhat contradictory?
Now we're talking. Okay. Yeah, no, I don't see that as a contradiction. I see it as a tension. And you're the first person to raise it, and it bothered me while I was writing the book, and no one who read it pointed it out, and I decided it was just in my head. Mm-hmm. And now I know it isn't, and I'm mad, and I want to go fix it. But so what I tried to do is I tried to write the resolution of it, and I think where I landed is there are different kinds of discomfort, and some are beneficial and some are not. The kind of discomfort I think is not beneficial is either burnout or bore-out. So you do not want to push yourself to chronic emotional exhaustion, where you feel like you have nothing left to give, and you're just completely drained of your energy. You also don't want to do something that's so monotonous that you can't imagine a reason to get excited about it, and you're just pushing yourself and using up all of your self-control. What you do want, I think, is the more manageable discomfort of social fear, of what are other people going to think of me? Can I give them this draft because they might judge me, they might think I'm stupid, or they might think I'm not as smart as I was on the last book. And then I've either lost it, or I've sold out, or I'm on a decline. It's that kind of discomfort that I think helps us, the hesitation to try something new and the hesitation to put our ideas in front of other people. That's what we need to get over, but I don't want you to suffer constantly.
Okay.
Did I resolve?
Maybe.
Maybe?
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, maybe the resolution is simply that you can't be uncomfortable all the time, and you've got to have some fun, right? But you can learn to have fun as well.
This is the Goldilocks theory of psychology.
Yeah.
Like everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything in moderation, including questions from me. We should have questions from you. I've got a couple of questions from the internet. Hello, I don't know where the internet is at the moment, but hello, internet. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for sending in your questions. But let's take some questions from the room. Maybe if you stick your hand up. Have we've got yeah, okay, so there's a question over there. Very enthusiastic questioner over there. I see a couple of questions here as well. So.
Hi, Madonna. Super briefly, 3 advices, tricks that you would give for people that really struggle in finding self-discipline.
Okay.
I don't know, reading the newspaper. I tried every single sort of trick, not happening.
Okay, great. There was a question here as well.
Hi, it's about, I guess your talk about perfectionism and your recovery from perfectionism. But then I also think of you on the treadmill trying to get better and better and better. So I wonder, how do you balance out that habit with...
Another contradiction. One more question. I see there's somebody here, or... Right.
Hi, thank you.
In a moment, sir, thank you.
What was an idea that was canon to your early thinking that you thought was absolutely true that now you've completely dispelled and do you think the opposite of, or perhaps vice versa?
Are you asking me to think again?
Adam never
hate
rethinks
that.
anything. Okay, so, yeah. We'll have a fourth question as well. You can hold them all in your mind, I'm sure.
Okay, I'm Antonius from Indonesia. So my question is, your suggestion is like always non-intuitive. You do not say like a counterintuitive. It's so counterintuitive for me. when we should start to like make a progress by like have a strength of like a burden of everyday struggle, like what Kobe Bryant said, train more, or like Michael Phelps say, train every day. It's so obvious, not like a hidden or like a change again things. So when we need the newness, and when we need the, like a strength of burden. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So we have discipline, perfectionism, we have rethinking, and then when to make a change. Where do you want to start?
Wherever you want to start.
Okay, well, let's just go in order. Discipline. Honestly, I think the most useful book I've read on that is Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you haven't read it, I've heard more people say it changed their ability to exercise self-control than anything else. I also really liked Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit. And so rather than giving you 3 random tips, I think those resources hopefully are more helpful if you don't already know them.
Do you view yourself as suffering from a self-discipline problem?
Yes, an excess of it.
Yeah. Yeah. What am I?
Like, it takes discipline for me not to work, actually, which is a weird problem.
Okay. Maybe we talk about that in a second. But yes. So we had. What else did we have? We had the.
Okay, so we had
tension.
perfectionism.
You're going to be a perfectionist, and yet there you are on the treadmill. So.
Yeah. So I wrote a whole chapter about recovering from perfectionism, and it turns out I'm still in recovery. I find it really challenging, but I do think there's a difference between aiming for perfect and aiming for better. And so what I've tried to do is I've tried to get more thoughtful about which goals are worth pursuing. And what I discovered on the treadmill is a lot of running is really boring. I don't like it. And if I have a goal to get a little bit better, that keeps me motivated. I like improvement. That for me is intrinsically exciting. And so I don't ever expect to hit like a result I'm proud of or that could win a race. But I like the feeling of progress. And so I'm trying to anchor on that as opposed to, well, here's a mistake I made and I screwed that up and now it ruined my day because I had a bad workout. Something I used to believe that I thought was canon that I no longer think is true. Here's a really core one. Okay, this is embarrassing. You know how like you can have an email signature and some people like to have quotes that are inspiring in theirs? Maybe that's just an American thing, but when I was in college, my email signature for, I think, all 4 years said, I am a great believer in luck, and I find that the harder I work, the more I have of it. Thomas Jefferson. And I'm embarrassed for multiple reasons. One, Thomas Jefferson never said that, it turns out. And I failed to fact check it. I just trusted Ask Jeeves at the time. 2, I think I carried around, first of all, an excessive confidence in the one-to-one relationship between effort and results. And I really underappreciated the importance of opportunity and circumstance in shaping the returns that you got on hard work. If you were lucky to have a great coach, if you were fortunate to be born with a lot of natural talent, right? Your hard work was going to lead to different kinds of results. The other thing that I guess I found myself really turning upside down is I loved that quote because I thought that hard work was a sign of virtue. Like, I equated being a hard worker with a good person. And I guess like that is the Protestant ethic. It's what Martin Luther brought. It's what Weber wrote about. I don't believe it anymore. I don't think hard work makes you a good person. I think sometimes, depending on what you're working at, working hard can make you a worse person. Because either the ends you're pursuing are harmful, or because your work ethic really undermines the way you treat other people. And so I've just abandoned my obsession with hard work altogether.
And making a change.
Yeah. When to make a change? My favorite way to think about this is to say, I hear this question from my students all the time. There's how do I know when it's time to take on a new skill, or to change jobs, or to change careers, or to move to new cities?
Or to quit. I actually got a question coming in from the internet on the importance of quitting, so it's related.
Yes, it is. So I worry a lot about a problem that Barry Stahl has called escalation of commitment to a losing course of action. This is where you make an initial decision, it does not work out as planned, but instead of rethinking it, you double down. And you would call it a sunk cost problem.
No, the escalation of commitment. But one of my favorite cautionary tales is about the Cottingley Fairies, and it's these 2 girls who ended up fooling Arthur Conan Doyle faking these fairies at the bottom of the garden. And they originally did it to play a trick on their parents. That trick backfired. And they finally confessed in their 70s because it just, like, there was never a way off that's kind of the escalation. There was never a moment where they could say, actually, we lied about that.
I love that episode of Cautionary Tales, and you played a trick on us as listeners in the way that you unfolded that story. And I'm not going to spoil it here, but it was a great moment for me where I was initially mad at you, and then I was just delighted at how well you fooled me. So that was a great emotional arc. Okay, so the escalation problem, what we know from the research on it is you can't de-escalate yourself because you have to prove to yourself and everyone else that this was a good decision all along. I actually had a student in office hours once who said, I'm wondering, this was about a week before her wedding, she came in and she said, I wonder if I'm making a mistake in marrying the wrong person. And I was like, whoa, I'm not that kind of psychologist. But I said, well, how did you get this close that you're now wondering a week before your wedding day? And she said, well, I've been with him for 4 years, and I couldn't stomach the idea of having wasted the 2 previous years with him. I was like, listen, it's better to admit that you wasted the last 2 than to waste the next 20. But I think because you're compromised, because you're so motivated to turn the failure around and to justify the time you've spent and to feel like you have good judgment and you're a smart decision maker, you can't trust your own judgment. And so you need to rely on other people. And what I love here is I love having a challenge network, which is a group of thoughtful coaches and sometimes critics who hold up a mirror and help you see your own blind spots. And so my advice to my students is have a checkup with your challenge network twice a year. Repeating reminder on your calendar to ask the people you really trust, what's something I should rethink? Is there something I should quit? Is there a change that you think I need to make? And you can't just ask 1 or 2 people because you're going to get their idiosyncratic opinion. What you want to do is go to enough people where you can start to triangulate and see, wow, 4 people who know me well independently had the same suggestion, and that's a real opportunity for me to grow as opposed to just kind of their pet idea for me.
Did she go through with the wedding?
Yes, and they are no longer together.
I mean, maybe that's for the best, because the alternative would have been to cancel the wedding and to tell everyone, Adam Grant told me not to marry the guy.
But just to be clear, like, she wanted an answer, and one of the things that I screwed up a lot in my early office hours was trying to give students answers because they were really desperate for someone who, other than their parents, who they thought had more experience and wisdom to tell them what to do. And I learned you actually can't know what's right for someone else. And that my job was not to help them find an answer, it was to help them clarify the question and what their values were so that they could answer it themselves. And so I think if I was helpful there, it was in asking, what do you want in a partner? What's most important to you? What are your deal breakers? And if you knew what you know now about this particular bloke, would you have still wanted to date him?
Yeah. Interesting. Sorry to have asked, but I was curious. You just dangled it there, and I was like, I need to know. Now I need to know. Let's take some more questions from the room. Stick your hands up. We got so many questions down here. Let's take some questions from the people over here. All these, wow, loads of people.
Hey, thank you, Francisco. So I used to work at Facebook for roughly 9 years, and I can 100% agree with what you said about perfectionism. And my question is, first of all, did you ever challenge Sheryl on her perfectionism? Because I think that'd be an interesting one. And my other one, what do you think is a healthy balance in a workforce where the leadership is so perfect and they really live what they say, but it creates a type of anxiety in the workforce as well? And what do you think is a good balance between having perfection as a goal and also giving comfort to your workforce that what they're doing is actually just good enough? Because the people that I work with always compared themselves and never felt they were good enough. And at the same time, they're all wonderful and amazing and really great people. And you were an advisor of that company, so I'm quite curious to hear your opinion on that one.
Can I comment quickly on both of those?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so on the second one, I think what I want to do as often as possible is to say, look, we can't get a 10 on everything. you can rarely get a 10 on anything. But if you try to get a 10 on everything, you're going to end up with a bunch of 2s and 3s on things that are getting neglected because you end up with tunnel vision and focus just on repairing the things you can easily control. And so what we need to have is a conversation about how important is this task. And I break down importance 2 ways. One is how high are the stakes? How much of an impact is it going to have on the organization and the people affected by it? And number 2, how consequential is it? Is it a reversible decision? Is the door going to lock behind you, or is it more of a revolving door? If it's a highly consequential, irreversible decision, you better be aiming for a 9, because it really matters and you can't easily change your mind tomorrow. If it's more reversible or lower stakes, we need to talk about what is acceptable, good enough. What does a 6.5 or 7 look like? And then stop working on it once we hit that standard. I had this discussion with Sheryl, in part because this is one of the only arguments I've ever won with her. We had this big debate about how to get to her high standards. And what she would do is she would write a sentence and then rewrite the sentence and rewrite the sentence and rewrite the sentence. And I pushed back on that for 2 reasons. One, it was it felt like we were never going to finish the book. And 2, we were going to end up with a really great intro and a really sloppy conclusion. And what I told her was...
You also don't know whether it's a good sentence until you see how...
Until the whole thing is done, exactly.
See the other sentences, yeah.
That's what I felt as well. So Vonnegut wrote about this. He talked about bashers and swoopers. Do you kind of edit as you go, or do you treat creating and revising as separate skills? And as we went through this, Sheryl decided that, in fact, we could get to the same outcome faster and in a more balanced way by doing a rough draft where we didn't have much quality control, and then coming back and bringing our more discerning lens to analyze and revise. So I think that was, she said she writes more that way now, so I feel like I maybe added something there.
Oh, interesting. Yes, questions.
If you have a mic, you can speak.
Yeah.
And let's make sure we get one to the front row, to Ashish.
Thank you. Hi, Ram. I love both your books and your podcast, but I also find your Instagram accounts so insightful. So I was wondering how you managed to write all these intricate and complex books, as well as communicate very succinctly these messages on your Instagram account. How do you do that? And even in terms of tactically, how do you manage the whole process of being online, basically?
I had questions like this as well. And there's a gentleman here, very enthusiastic with... So I'd like to see.
Hey, Adam. Just want to say your podcast has helped me through my own journey going through mental health and suicide and self-harm. And your books has helped me as well. I'm a spoken word artist, I'm a poet, I'm a rapper. And obviously I've got autism as well. And my question is to you that, can I share my rap to you and to your people for mental health awareness, please, on stage?
Wow.
How long is the rap?
1 minute.
1 minute.
Definitely, Get up here.
Just film it the other way. This way, that one. Yo. Depression, anxiety, loneliness, intimidation, purpose, nation, impact the world, nation. I've been through that pain where people are calling me insane. Suicide still increasing, depression still increasing, loneliness still increasing. Pain to the purpose, panic to my brain, to my heart, to my soul. Social media addiction that they go through, depression attacks that they go through, loneliness times that they go through. Rose of love when you can't love yourself. Rose of love when you're going through depression. Rose of love when you're going through anxiety, birth, death, old age, disease, nature. Hope, praying that God's natures are blessing me through together. Walk it, talk it, heal it through together. I'm a mental health survivor. I'm a self-harm survivor. I'm a suicide attempt survivor. Depression, anxiety, purpose. Rose of love when you can't love yourself. Rose of love when you're going through depression. Rose of love when you're going through anxiety. The panics and the worries and darkness around me. These are the words that describe anxiety, but the doctors will call it self-harm. If you're going through mental health battles in this world, remember you are not alone too.
That was amazing. Amazing. I loved it. Thank you. I love that. Thank you. Wow. Send me an email, please. Can I just say, first of all, that took tremendous courage, all of it. And secondly, you, sir, your potential is not hidden. Thank you.
So,
wow.
I hate it when these evenings are so predictable. Thank you. So yeah, one more question. Yes, yes.
Hi, Adam. On the feedback and advice thing that you were talking about before, in this modern world where people are absolutely divided and also people read very little, both sides, I mean, when you're taking advice, how do you filter out what's logical, what's not? That's one. And then when you're giving advice, a lot of people say that they want advice, but the moment they say something, you're the worst enemy or something. So how do you navigate that? That's what I wanted to ask you. Thanks.
Good.
Thank you very much. Oh, actually, we've got one more question up there.
Thank you so much. Adam, I'm a massive fan. Loved everything you said tonight. Follow you on social as well. Love the succinct posts. My question tonight, we already touched on it as a potential subject, Tim, is how do you stop working, or what advice do you have for people who love working? Oh. I'm also asking for a friend.
Okay, great. So we've got polarization, people who ask for feedback but don't want feedback. How do you get so much done? Why don't you stop doing so much?
And then Instagram.
Yeah, and yes, so go for it.
All right, workaholism. Read Melissa Clark's forthcoming book, Never Not Working. It's all about the science of how to set boundaries. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned from that body of research is, actually my colleague Nancy Rothbard studied this. She studied the difference between engaged and compulsive workaholics. So there's a huge difference between working because you feel guilty if you don't, and you feel like you're never enough, and working because you love your job, and you're excited about the problems you're trying to solve, and you care about the people you're trying to help. And what Nancy shows is that the former is unhealthy and the latter is not problematic. And so what I try to pay attention to is the question of why am I working, not how much am I working. And that's made a huge difference for me to try to let the engaged workaholism happen and then contain it, which means I don't start working until our kids leave for school. My goal is to stop before they get home, and I have an alarm that goes off. And then if I fail at that, I basically punish myself with a series of commitments, which include I'm not going to work tomorrow, which I'm really lucky to have the luxury to make that choice. So I don't know how helpful that is, but
I think it's very helpful. I think what's striking about this idea of the compulsion to work because you're feeling guilty versus being engaged and loving your job is a lot of the kinds of things that people really struggle with. So social media, Slack, email, these are often demands on your attention. They make you feel guilty, they make you feel anxious, but then they're not fun. Well, I certainly don't find them fun. And these are exactly the kinds of things that very easily bleed into your, into a time when you shouldn't be working.
Yeah, agreed. Advice. Let's see, I think, well, can I offer some unsolicited advice to all of you? Don't give unsolicited advice. We know buy-in really matters, is the first thing. So I think asking, are you interested in my advice, is a good first step. But I found it actually helpful to have a broader conversation about that. So I'll go back to students in office hours for a second. My question now is, why are you here? Are you really torn between multiple options and you want me to help you weigh them and decide which one might be a better choice? I'm happy to do that if I can. Are you here because you want me to poke holes in your reasoning and you're already leaning one way and you want to make sure that you've really thought this through carefully? Okay, I'm glad to play that role. I'll be your challenge network. Are you here because you just want a stamp of approval on a decision you've already made? Guess what? You don't need to come to office hours for that. If you think a choice you're making is good for your happiness or your success, I support it. I want what you think is best for you. You don't need to tell me what your plan is for me to say hooray, yes, good decision. And in that conversation, I find out that a lot of people are not actually looking for advice. They're looking to think out loud and then kind of hear themselves. And I don't have a problem with that. I think this is really hard in a time of polarization, both as an advice giver and an advice seeker. I put a Venn diagram in the book. I think it's in chapter 2, the sponge chapter. I have 3 questions that I've learned to ask from both the research and my experience when I receive advice. Number 1, and the most important question is this person trying to help me? If not, then why should I listen to them? If they're not here to help me get better, they might be a troll. And I shouldn't put a lot of faith in their suggestion. Number two, is this person credible in this situation? So do they actually have a track record of accomplishment or expertise in the area they're advising on? If so, I'm more likely to listen to them. And then number three, how familiar is this person with me? Do they know me well enough to give me personalized advice? If not, what they're suggesting may work well for them, but not apply to my goals and my values. And I found that running the advice and frankly, the criticism I get through that set of lenses is really helpful in filtering what I want to pay attention to and what I want to discount. And this actually goes to Instagram. Look, I don't have a real job, is the short answer. I don't. Like, I teach classes sometimes, and the rest of my time is free.
Wharton, it says here.
Yeah, but I teach 2 classes a year, and one of them is a week and a half.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of flexibility, and that time is dedicated to research, to writing, to data analysis, to advising doctoral students, to doing events like this, and speaking and podcasting. And I feel like I've failed if I haven't either had a new idea or learned about a new idea each day. And what I used to do is anytime I read an interesting study or had an interesting conversation, I would send the study to somebody, or I would forward the article to someone who I thought would find it interesting. And basically, social media is my replacement for that, because I realized I was spamming my friends all the time. And sometimes they're like, I don't need another article from you. Like, just because you thought this was interesting, I'm like, oh, but if I have a random audience of people who have opted in, maybe they do want to see what the research was that I thought was intriguing. And I think this is obviously an extreme case because my job is to both create and communicate knowledge. But I think for anybody, like, whenever you learn something new, or whenever you have an aha moment in a conversation, your first impulse is to share it. Like, we're not just curious creatures, right? We're also creatures who really love to be teachers. And so I would say, like, whatever the thing is that was a light bulb moment for you, that's something you probably want to share with someone else. And there's no reason why that couldn't become a practice that you do on a blog or on a social platform.
Yes, but...
Now, you really came out of your shell in the last half hour, Tim.
It takes time, right? It all takes time. So you've already told us you're quite disciplined at only working within the school day. That's a big constraint on your time. And you've got all these different projects. You've got these books. You've described this very detailed process of drafting and redrafting and seeking advice and going back and redrafting again. You've got your teaching. Fine, it's not much teaching. You've got your research. You've got the TED podcast. You've got various business enterprises. There's all this different stuff going on. I always find this sort of thing to be a challenge because on the one hand, everything feeds everything else. There's that fascinating cross-fertilization. On the other hand, everything gets in the way of everything else. Like, you're constantly being distracted from your work by
sorry, what were you saying?
by your other work. So how is it that you manage, how do you manage to not constantly have your Instagram posts get in the way of your writing, or your writing get in the way of your research, or your research get in the way of your podcasting? How are you managing that?
I don't know. I hope they're not getting in the way. Where's Jim Barry? Where's Jim? Jim, can you answer this question? Jim was an amazing PhD student with me a long time ago. He's now a star professor here at UCL, a world expert on creativity. Jim, I never know how to answer this question. Is there anything you learned from working with me that I should say?
The folks online must be just like, what is
going on?
They're all off the chain in the Cadogan Hall. Anyway, yes. Hi, Jim.
So what was the question again? No.
How
Honestly,
does Adam Grant do it is the question, right? What should he say?
At 3 a.m., when I would have asked him a question at 11, and I get the response back at 3 a.m., and I would wake up at 8 and look at it, and it was totally changed how I thought about it. I just realized that I think part of this work piece is your mind doesn't shut off, and that you're constantly churning on these issues. Look, I'm out of breath.
That'd be the running.
I need to get on the treadmill, I think. But I think you really sequence to get to the core of the problem. And so many people fight around the edges of things, and you spend time getting to the meat. What is the thing that I need to address here? And I think that's what I draw out of all of the conversations I've had with you.
Thank you. That's helpful, Jim. Thank you. It's funny. I think my wife asked me once, like, "Can we turn your brain off?" Because like we'll be listening to a song on the radio, and I'm like, "Well, what do they mean by that lyric?" Like, "Can't you just enjoy the song?" I'm like, "No, I have to know why." But I think there's something to that. Like I feel really fortunate that I happen to opt into a field that I find endlessly fascinating. And so human psychology and behavior, I wake up in the morning thinking about it, I go to bed at night thinking about it. It kind of pervades my life, and it doesn't feel like work. It's fun. But I think one of the things that does is, actually, at a meeting a few years ago where it was like 1:57 p.m. and the meeting's over at 2. And we just finished a big piece of a project, and my co-author said, "All right, let's be done." And I was like, "No, we have 3 more minutes, and we're going to use them." And she came back afterward, and she said, "Your willingness to keep your brain on for those 3 minutes, how many of those 3-minute intervals do you have over the course of a week?" And we did the math, and it added up to a couple extra hours of work over the course of a week. And I was like, "Wait, is this not normal? Do you not do this?" She's like, "No, I have random conversation for the last 3 minutes." I'm like, "Yeah, but if I wanted to do that, I would have called you not in our meeting. Like, this meeting is to work." And so I guess there's a discipline that I found really helpful, which is I try to wake up each morning with one project that I think is interesting and important. And if I make progress on that project, I'm willing to let other things drop. And that would be a lot harder if I had a boss.
I mean, it's been amazing. Thank you, Adam. Thank you everybody for contributing so fully and so interestingly from the floor. Thank you all for making the journey. Thank you to Intelligence Squared, the amazing team there, for hosting us. Your generosity of spirit, Adam, your intellect and your creativity have been just a joy to sit with. So
wait a second, hold on. No, you can't end here. I want to say something first.
Okay.
First of all, can we thank Tim Harford for showing up? Tim, I really cannot believe how much time and thought you put into this book, and it made me very nervous, frankly. But I really appreciate and admire how carefully you dig into everything you read, and you always challenge me to think deeper and also broader, and tonight has been no exception, and I'm grateful for that, and now that we've met, I think we might be friends. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then, thank you. And then I would love to say to the audience, did anybody see the Guardian headline, the Super Bowl of democracy is this year, this week? I had a real problem with that headline. This is the World Cup of democracy. But that aside, I think a lot of us are worried that we're living in a time when people are getting dumber and more tribal and more hateful. And the intellectual curiosity and open-mindedness and compassion and courage in this room gives me real hope for democracy. And I just want to thank you all. It's been an honor to be here. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Grant.
Thank you.
Should we go?
Wow.